Welcome back to the Future of Figure Skating. My name's Anna Keller, and I'm joined today by Niko Cohen. We're going to talk about the work that Niko's doing as a figure skating costume designer, as well as their skating themselves. And I'm really excited for this conversation because I've admired Niko as a skater for a while.
Ooh,
Ever since,
ooh.
ever
Ooh.
since I saw you at the exhibition at the Skating Club of Boston a couple of years ago. So I was very excited to see the launch of your business, Lavender Thread, and some of the work that you've been posting on Instagram recently. It's really exciting.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about it all. But first off, my understanding is that you got into skating while you were in college, sort of as an adult skater. Is that right? And sort of how did you
Yes.
get the
So
skating bug?
I uh I am a Yuri on Ice convert into becoming a figure skater. I did watch the first episode of the anime the first week that it aired in like October of 2016 and was like, this is my whole personality now. We're only one episode in. Play. And here we are however many years later, and I'm still here. So,
Amazing.
yeah, watched the anime in 2016. Took a group class at BU, where I went to college, for costume production. Took a group class in the spring, and I literally have not stopped skating since. So
That's
the
really,
the, the beautiful anime boys made me do it.
I skated as a kid and everything, but it was definitely watching Yuri on Ice that reminded me that I liked skating. Like it was like watching the animation of the programs, even though it doesn't look that much like skating, there was something about the like way the motion of it
Yeah.
is. I was like, oh right, skating is
Like, oh,
great. And like
yeah,
I went
yeah,
back
yeah, yeah.
to it's funny how
I did do learn to skate as a kid. But that was just like, actually, I was going through my mom's things a couple years ago, and I found the like, who did your best ribbon because I apparently didn't pass whatever test I was supposed to pass for skating. So I was like, that's very funny to me. So now it's with all my U.S. figure skating qualifying championship medals. I'm like, how we started, how it's going.
That's so great. You don't have to be, some of us are not talented as children, and it doesn't stop us from getting there eventually. So have done both single skating and theater on ice, is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I
Awesome.
did I did theater on ice for 2 seasons, but then as of this season, I have not been doing theater on ice.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about what your experience has been like as a trans person in an adult skating world, and sort of how you've navigated that space where there are definitely choices to be made, both about how you sort of label and sort yourself officially, and then lots of sort of daily choices to be made around that. But what's your experience been like?
Um, Kind of all over the place. Especially because like I'm not a binary transgender person. I'm not going from one end of a spectrum to another end of a spectrum. If I had to choose an official title, I would choose agender. I'm like, it's not real. I don't want it. I'm here for the vibes. Like, I don't want this. I didn't sign up for this. Why is this happening? That being said, I am trans mask in that I am on HRT. I have had top surgery. I generally physically present more masculine in that like I wear joggers, my skates are black. Um, like I don't wear dresses when I skate, but I do compete with women. I like cute feminine things. My company is called Lavender Thread Co. Like, yes, it's gay, but it's also like purple is my favorite color. My whole apartment is like, or my studio is very like cute, pink. All my supplies are pink. Sanrio, yay. Um, in terms of dating as an adult and being trans, because I started as an adult, I think I avoided a lot of the like the normal amount of like teen and child and young person like self-discovery. If I had to do that in figure skating,
Mhm.
I think it would have been exponentially worse. But I was an adult when I came into this, and I already had that figured out and already knew what was going on. So I didn't have to fight that on top of I'm now trying to learn how to not just figure skate, but navigate the culture of figure skating as a whole. Um, so that's a good solid base to start. Um,
Why did,
in terms,
sorry, go
sorry,
ahead.
no, you're good.
I was just curious why you decided that you wanted to compete in the women's category. Like, I mean, just if you have
Yeah,
those two choices.
so there's not a lot of men, unfortunately. I think more people should skate in general. Um, I also love to make things harder for myself. And for the level that I compete at, um, there's there are just more women than men. And because there are not as many men competing, the range of skills and abilities of the competitors tends to be more difficult with women because there are more of them. And because there are more of them, it's more competitive. There's not that there isn't a push for the men to get better at skating at certain levels to like perform a certain way or whatever. But for example, like national adult nationals 2023, all things considered equal, like same program, same judges, whatever. I placed seventh nationally overall for adult silver, whereas I would have been the men's silver medalist, national silver medalist. And like I got base spin, I had no axle, and that this is just me. This is I don't want this to be like a reflection on other people and their choices. This is just me being insane. I want to win because I want to do well because I did the hardest elements that I could do, that I really pushed myself, that I felt like I was being pushed by the people around me. And I want to prove that I have to get to nationals. I don't want to just show up and there weren't enough people, so I get to go anyway. And again, so sincerely, this is not a reflection on the men that do compete. This is just more of a reflection of like the system and the amount of people and whatnot in general. Like, I'm not trying to be a hater. I'm a hater to myself because I make my life difficult. But then when I do well, it feels very rewarding. So I kind of balance the like, ooh, I'm gonna get misgendered and people are gonna see me a certain way because I'm competing with women. Um, but the satisfaction of doing better than everyone is so like figure skating is the right sport for me, deeply unfortunately. That I'm like, actually for now, I will take that trade-off. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. And it gets to that question that we sometimes have of like, at least at the adult level, what would happen if they just combined all the categories, gender-wise? Because I'm just going to explain for people who are not familiar with this, and I have a lot of followers who are not from the US, but like in the US adult system, you're put into categories by gender, by level, and by age. And then sometimes they combine the age categories if there aren't enough skaters. And so I always thought like they should combine the gender categories if there aren't very many skaters, because it's always sad if there's like one man in a competition who then is just like doesn't really have that much motivation, perhaps if they're just out there skating alone. Whereas the technical abilities are not actually that different. And besides, you've already kind of tried to balance for those technical abilities by having it be divided up by different levels and ages already. So, it's been interesting to think about that. And then watching the solo dance starting to come into the international sphere has been really interesting, because that is all genders competing together. But we have not very differently gendered sport when it comes to like the actual moves people do on the ice. There are certain things that tend to be one way or another, but not that much compared to a lot of sports. But then the presentation is super gendered. And so I'm curious how that part of it has been for you, trying to sort of navigate, like you were saying, presenting yourself in a more mask way, but then skating in the women's category, if that's something that you felt like was challenging for judges, or people just have rolled with it. Because I think that's one of the questions I'd have of like, how do you combine if people are used to sort of judging, especially artistry, in very gendered terms?
Yeah. So I have thought about, if I were to compete in the men's category, would I start to wear more dresses? And the answer is maybe, because I love to be a problem. Maybe I might. I don't dislike dresses. I dislike feeling like people are seeing an external me and assigning something to that, which is like part of why I'm like, oh, I'm agender, because I don't want it to be, I feel like, see me for me and the skating skills and what I'm doing and like my personality, not that I decided to wear a piece of fabric, more fabric than less fabric, or fabric that loops around my leg versus fabric that is open all the way around. Like,
Yeah.
I, in terms of like other presentation stuff, sorry, my brain is not great. I don't want to necessarily like comment that this is like a truth that happened, but it, I perceived at the most recent adult nationals, not just in my event, but in other events as well, regardless of if it was a gendered or co-ed event of like showcase versus singles. Showcase, which is also combined.
Yeah.
Uh, I felt like those who, for example, in the women's category, who had very typical, like, I'm a woman and I'm presenting as a woman and I'm in the women's category and I have a dress that's flowy and my movements are those that are typically associated with femininity and stuff like that, I felt were scored higher than myself and other skaters in the same event and other events, etc., that did not skate in a way or present themselves in a way, even if they were cisgendered, that was like maybe traditionally sought after from a judging panel in figure skating. And I had a big long talk about that with my primary coach about what do I do this season? Like my goal for this season, I want to win. I want to win nationals. And so like I'm putting in the work on technical elements, I'm putting in the work on my skating skills, whatever. But also like, what song am I skating to? How am I presenting myself? How do I stay authentic to myself while also giving the judges what they want, assuming worst case scenario if it's like a super traditional panel. It's not everyone, but if the panel happens to be more like traditional leaning, how do I make sure that I'm getting as many points as possible with that potential scenario? gonna say something else. Oh, and then back to the like the how it's split by age, level, and gender. I also find that there's difference between 6.0 and IJS events, where
Mhm.
6.0, they, at least for local competitions here in the Boston, greater Boston area, I've found that they are more likely to potentially add the like single male skater or like the two boys or whatever in with the rest of the women or girls. But for IJS, I have not seen that in the local area. That could be completely different for other parts of the country. But yeah, it really is kind of a turnoff of like, I think I would like to compete with men, but I don't want to be alone. And I think it would feel really stupid for me to show up to a competition and if there were no other like men presenting in a traditionally masculine way, whether they are cis or trans, like I
Mhm.
definitely do not look like a cis man. I don't
Yeah.
think I do. I don't. Um, it would be very silly if I showed up to a competition and there's like 7 or 8 women, and then I'm just there like, hey.
Mhm.
It's like, what? Why? What is the reason? What is the point? This is why
Yeah,
we are having a silly, goofy time, and it's not fun. Um, yeah,
totally. Yeah, that it's interesting within the system that now there's an option within when you sign up for US figure skating membership to put in a pronoun, but they're still not making any distinction between, what is your gender versus what is the gender you like gendered category that you would like to compete in.
yep. I
And then
have emailed
assuming one
member
of those
services
equals the
about
other.
that. I've emailed them many times to be like, and this is before they even had the option to put in pronouns, preferred pronouns. It was just like nightmare. This isn't like what is the reason? It's so. I think it's could be done better.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's another one of those things, as I've talked to a lot of Canadians, that they've figured out how to do this, and that every time that I talk to people in the US figure skating and member services and all of this, they say, oh, yeah, we're thinking about this, we're working on it, but there's no transparency about what that process looks like or how to give it any feedback. So it's a bit, take it on faith that we're working on it is a little questionable. But this is, something that I find very ironic because I do pairs where I think about as like a non-binary person, but who's in US figure skating under the women's category. I haven't competed in several years, so like that part's a little less relevant to me, but like I'm in there under that category. And because of that, my skating partner, Erica, and I can't compete in adult pairs yet. Whereas if I just was like, oh, I actually am a trans man, I'm going to sign up and switch my gender marker to being a man. Great, we could be a pair team now. And it's like exactly what the sort of harm, like fear mongering about like trans people in sports is. And I'm like, you are the ones who are trying to force us into like, not that, and I'm not going to do that, partly because I want to change the system more than I want just to be able to compete in adult bronze pairs, where, speaking of which, I don't think there were any this year. So it's not
Yeah,
exactly a overflowing category to begin with. But there are all of these ironies of the way that the system is badly trying to account for trans people, but only in a very binary way.
yeah, yeah. Not a fan. Don't love it, especially like with the level cap of technique and stuff. Because like having done theater on ice and having uh, I assisted with synchro costumes working for my previous employer. Um, like like if the gender, if there doesn't need to be a separated gender for theater, like these are big team events, so like I get that it's that
Yeah.
is different in that way. Like if they're for showcase where you're competing individually as
Yeah.
well, and there tend to be certain technical limitations within showcase.
Yeah.
Why haven't we made that change yet for singles? And like people will talk about like, oh, at the elite level, like there's biological advantages of one sex versus the other for quads, for this, for that. And I have opinions on it, but I don't feel like I can speak to it because it's not my experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And that absolutely. And I think when you get to these questions about like what are gendered abilities, it gets really complicated because there's so much of it that's not like there's a wide range within like biology where we're making shortcuts both by gender for a wide range of different body types and abilities. And then also you get into questions of like training and like if you're told from the time you're a little kid that you're going to have to land a triple axel to be competitive, you train differently than if you are not told that. So there's all of these
Yeah.
factors that fit into it. But I always kind of would say with a lot of this stuff, what's the harm of, trying to be more inclusive? Certainly that's when we look at pair teams, that's the case. It's like, oh, they're going to be, what's the worst case scenario? They're going to be really bad or they're going to be really good. But like, it's sort of funny what like we're kind of, people are imagining scenarios rather than sort of thinking about what is more realistic to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
It seems like in terms of sort of broader questions of inclusion in skating, I was pleasantly surprised, I will say, with the first time that I went to the Skating Club of Boston to see that, for example, that they had gender neutral bathrooms there and that it was an environment that was hosting a like
That
pride event and a fundraiser for like
that
medical or
a
for
lot
trans.
of that is because I would not shut up about how it was not available after
Mm,
the rink had opened.
that's great.
They were previously named other things, and I was like, "Hi, where do I go?" Because there is nothing delegating where I can go. So please fix it. And I would still like more. I would love for there to be an all gender locker room that is 18 and up and an all gender locker room that is 17 and under, because then you get into like safe sport violation zone of people sharing spaces accidentally. Um, you know, Also that because it was not originally intended as an all gender locker room, they also use it as the accounting room for competition. So even if I am signed up for a competition at the Skating Club of Boston, I cannot use my own locker room because there's a bunch of computer equipment in there. And they find other space for that competition, but it's kind of like the principle of it.
Yeah.
All of that being said, it's better than at a lot of other places. So like on the one hand, it's like, oh, I feel thankful that this exists. On the other hand, the bar is on the ground, it's on the floor. Like, can we
Yeah.
not raise it a little higher? So
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing that advocacy though, because I think that it certainly made a difference in terms of me feeling like it was a space that would be inclusive when I walked in. Because I think I had an impression from being a kid of like the Skating Club of Boston as like the most like old-fashioned conservative, like
yeah,
snooty kind of place. And so it was really nice to see that that was at least in part.
yeah,
Not the case and that they were at least somewhat responsive to what you were bringing to them.
yeah.
But what kind of advice would you have for other people who are coming into an environment that is not yet there, or even starting that process and sort of, advocating for themselves or others about was gonna say accommodations. That's not even really like what I'm saying. It's
Yeah,
just
I
like
know what you mean.
basic,
Yeah,
basic equal treatment, but
yeah.
that kind of thing.
Um, I will say, just before I get into that, Skating Club of Boston has been working on being better. And I do have to commend them for that. It is a very large club with a brand new, very expensive, very nice facility. And there's a lot of growing pains. There's a lot of changes in programming. There's just a lot of everything happening all the time. Um, Changes in management and leadership that I think recently have been for the better. So I am hopeful of more positive change in the future from them specifically because they're the club, they're my home club, and I represent them, and I want to be proud of um, representing them. Um, in terms of like trying to advocate for yourself and for others that are in a similar position, you cannot do it alone. You can have all of the like best intention and planning and like politicking prowess, whatever. If you are alone, you cannot. You like, and it helps to have friends surrounding you and like a support system. But in places where there are larger systems that are dictating all of this and like really big financial barriers of like trying to make change happen, like financial barriers that unless you are insanely independently wealthy, like you're not going to be able to, like just figure skating. Am I right? LOL. So, like meet people on the board of your club that you have to put yourself out there, and that is scary, but making change is scary. See if you can find someone on the board of the club of whoever owns the rink, or a coach that has social capital that supports you and that you can work with, whether they have social capital within the club, within the rink facility. Getting Club Boston their own rink, so that is a positive in that regard. That's not two separate entities that you have to fight against or with. Or if that coach or other board member, whatever, has social capital within US figure skating itself or whatnot, find those people and ask for their help and see how you can collaborate together, not just as a one-sided like, I need your help, with social capital, but like, here's the thing that I hope you care about. It impacts me and many others directly. Can we work together to try to make something happen? And also don't ever shut up. Like keep yapping, yappa, yappa, yappa all the time. Like as soon as you stop or like lessen up the amount of yappa yappa that you got going on, people will be like, oh, everything's great. We've like assuaged their concerns. No, yappa, 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 yappa city, keep going, and do not stop. Take breaks, do not stop.
Yeah. No, that very much resonates with my experience. And I probably do less of my advocacy within my own rink than I do within other spaces. And I think that it took me a long time to feel like like I belonged enough within my own rink to then have the confidence to do that. But of course, then you turn around and think like, well, but wouldn't I feel like I belonged more if these things were changing and I'm giving people an opportunity to make it better? And so it's taken me a little while. And where I skate in a public rink that has an ISI program, and like intentionally did not go back to the skating club where I skated as a kid. Like it was like, from everything I hear, it was like just as toxic now as it was then. So nope, I'm not going back there. And so kind of intentionally avoided those spaces. So then I find it really encouraging to hear that like there are clubs that are trying to make things better, that are not only those spaces. And like, I'm not a member of the Skating Club of Boston. I go skate once a month. But it's been a cool thing to see in that space that I had like incredibly low expectations for it, to have it be, a place that I did feel like, as an adult skater in a gender non-conforming pair team that I would like people would just be like, okay, yeah, you're here. That's fine. That's normal. That's
Yeah.
okay. And even that was um, a pleasant surprise.
Yeah. I will also say like I haven't, it's different because we're adults.
Yeah.
But even just seeing how younger kids who they might not even know yet that they're queer, but like, mama, I see it from miles away. Like, bless your heart. You're doing the whole thing. Um, but the fact that they are comfortable enough to like just like be silly and behave in a way that is maybe not like standard for their gender or whatever, and like who cares? Like
Yeah.
it's fine. If they do care, then like it's that person's problem, and it's not like, at least from what I'm seeing when I am there, in a public space, like
Hmm.
it doesn't seem to be like, ooh, this kid is acting a certain type of fruity way. Like that's a problem. Like no one cares.
Yeah.
We all have a silly, goofy time, and it's fine. And for the adults especially, like it is for the most part like a very open and welcoming community, especially at the Skating Club of Boston, where like one of my best friends is on the ACAC, the Adult Activities Committee, etc. I don't know what I'm for. Really pushing to make sure that it's like people are included no matter what discipline or age or gender or presentation or whatever. Like if you're an adult and you're here to skate, great, amazing, fabulous, wonderful. Like we have space for you. Um, so that's nice. Again, more of the like things are trending upwards and we love to see it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there are a lot of things that are can still keep getting much better, and it's definitely not like this in every rink in the US for sure,
Yeah.
much less other places as well. But I do think that there are definitely examples for like people looking to think like, oh, can this be done? Being able to point to like an old established club being able to make these changes. I think, even though they're also like a wealthy club and that helps, but still like I think it does help for others to be able to see that in action. I want to shift a little bit and talk about your work with costume design and your company and all of this. So, just to start off, how did you get into making skating costumes, and what's this journey been like?
So uh when I was very young, I would like not make costumes, but I would like dress up in clothes and I'd be like, I'm this character. Haha. I had a pair of like sunglasses where the lens was yellow, and for some reason in my brain, I was like, I'm Pikachu because everything is yellow, I guess. I don't know. 4-year-old
Yeah,
was doing
totally.
something. Um, and then in middle school, middle and high school, I was cosplaying. I'd like go to anime conventions and stuff. And then in high school, I learned how to sew, like on a sewing machine properly. And then I pursued a Bachelor of Fine Arts in theatrical costume production from BU. So then a lot of my experience with costuming was obviously with cosplay, which I don't really do anymore. But then doing like opera, ballet, theater work, musicals, stuff like that. And then the pandemic happened and everything shut down, but especially like theater where you have to be in contact with other people in very close proximity. And so they're like, ooh, let's not. I'm like, yikes. And at that point, I had managed to buy my first car and got a connection to my previous boss, Yumi, who's the Yumi Couture. She's like an Olympic level costumer for Team Japan, Team USA, Team China, Team Australia, like had done this forever. And she's done a lot of costumes at the Skating Club of Boston over her long costuming career. Um, and so I reached out to a coach at the rink who was affiliated with her. He connected us, and I basically was just like, "Hi, do you need help? I speak Japanese and I sew, and I am also a figure skater." um, and so then I was an associate designer and dressmaker for Yumi Couture for 2 seasons. And towards the end of my time there, Yumi had talked about wanting to shift where and how she does work and thinking about retirement and stuff like that. So I got her blessing to that wouldn't be a huge flop if I started my own company. And so at the end of 2022, I had filed for my LLC and started Lavender Thread Co. And now here we are, flying by the seat of my pants. It's happening, I guess. Ah!
Yeah, but I mean, I've seen some of the pictures of the costumes that you've designed, and you've been, designing for skaters who are competing at, high level international events and stuff. So it seems like it's going well.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what your process is. I've actually never had a costume designer on the podcast before, so I'm going to ask you some of the sort of basic questions about what it's like going from the idea and the design through to making the costume.
Yeah. Every person's process is different. This is mine. I um obviously ask for the music. I can't design without the music. I ask the skater if for things that they do or don't like, if they already have anything in mind, if they have any inspirations, if they want something that's more like character based or like ephemeral, I guess. I don't know, like conceptual. Not ephemeral. Conceptual is the word I'm looking for. And from there, I listen to the song a bajillion times because that's how my brain works. And for my actual like alone design time, I try to think about like, what is the music doing and how does that translate? How does an audio vocabulary translate to a visual vocabulary with all of the parameters given by the skater and their family and their coaching and choreography team? And we kind of go from there of like, is the sound really sharp? Are the movements sharp? Is it more smooth and soft? Are they as a character from skating as a character from an opera, or like something like that? Um, then once we all agree on a design, we love it, fab, amazing. I get their measurements, I make all the patterns myself, I cut fabric, we do the first fitting, I do the alterations, make sure everything fits and whatnot. And I really try to be like, if at any point the skater feels uncomfortable with, or they're like, I don't like this, or like, actually, I thought I liked this idea, but it's like really kind of ugly, or like literally anything, I'm like, please tell me, please tell me immediately, and don't not tell me, because if you don't tell me and you don't like it, I cannot fix it, and I won't know that it's wrong, and I'm just going to keep being like, wow, I love it, amazing, like, please, communication, please, I am begging. So then I do the alterations, I do all the decorations, the stoning, if it has any lace or fabric gathering or airbrushing or dyeing or painting, whatever, do all that. Then we do a second and final fitting that's like, oh, here's the finished garment, yay, amazing, slay, oh, work. And then they try it on the ice. It if there's like small adjustments of like, oh, this feels kind of loose or whatever, then I make adjustments. And they go and do their competition or their program or their exhibition, and then they look stunning and they slay. I recently have been starting made to order costumes though, where instead of the longer and much more expensive process of a fully custom garment, one of my like business, I don't know if model is the right word, one of my business like points that is really important to me is accessibility. Part of that accessibility is finances, because figure skating is prohibitively expensive. So by doing the made to orders, it's the skaters pick, like mix and match, like a sleeve, a top, a bottom, a color, a stone pattern. It's in a standard size. There's no alterations. There's no fitting. I made and adjusted patterns in a standard size, and I just make it and give it to them. And that saves a lot of time and money. But then the skater still gets to feel like they're wearing something like, ooh, like I designed it. Yeah. Ooh,
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, they got to still have some of that part of figuring out what they wanted it to be to fit their program. So yeah, no, that's a really cool sort of in between option for people. When are there costumes that you have designed that you're particularly proud of, or sort of, particularly challenging sort of set of, problems or constraints, or, a music idea you hadn't ever heard of before, or anything that, stands out as, particularly proud that you were able to?
Yeah. So this is technically, we're not even at 2 full years of being Lavender Thread Co. So like, I don't feel like I have a lot to pull on of like this specific chapter. I don't know if I have like one costume that I'm most proud of. I feel like there's different parts of different costumes that I'm like, I'm so happy that this turned out well, or like, oh, okay, like that went really, like that also turned out well, and like I executed it in a way that everyone was happy with, like that, like feeling of relief. I have anxiety disorder, so I don't know if proud is the right word, but like relief from the perpetual anxiety of making things for other people.
Yeah.
It's very real. um, I think the like technical construction things that I feel most proud of is like, I know how to make something that looks good on the person wearing it. Like seeing where that person's lines are for their body, and being like, this is probably where we should have this design element and this design element and this design element, so that it looks in the most pleasing way possible when it's on that person. Like my tailoring skills, it's time consuming, but I do really like hand sewing and like the fine detail sewing, like pattern matching. I love to do all of that, making sure that everything is like actually even on both sides and balanced. And also knowing that like when that final fitting happens and the skater is like, or even like during the first fitting, they're like, oh my God, I love it. Like, I feel amazing. This is exactly what I envisioned. This is what I wanted. Like, I feel great. It feels like wearable and good. Is a feeling of great satisfaction of like, I did it. Nice.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and like, I am, of course, proud of every Team USA skater that I have had the fortune and privilege of making costumes for, and especially Max, who made the podium at US Nationals this past season. I'm like proud of this. I'm like, yeah, okay, like I did the costume, but like the skaters did the hard work, and I'm very proud of them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, of course. And that's the thing of it's like it's an individual sport, but there are so many people's work that goes into,
Yeah.
producing the end product that see at nationals. And so you certainly have like that part of all of your energy and effort is definitely carried forward into that space. That's really cool.
Did you ask about challenges, or did you just ask about?
I asked sort of about both of them, because I think
Okay.
sometimes the things
Oh,
you're
my funny
proud of
question.
are
Wait, like
overcoming
challenges. Let me tell you
challenges,
about
but
these
yes.
challenges. I am also going off of my, like, you gave me the questions, and so I wrote them down in bullet points, but now they're not being asked in order, and I'm like, oh, do I
Sorry.
have a slow one? That's not on you. That's just my brain being really good. Um,
No,
um,
you were absolutely good. Yes.
in terms of like challenges, um, I think like emotionally what's challenging is when I feel like not that I'm not being trusted with the costume and the design, because like obviously they trust me if they're coming to me and doing business with me and whatnot. But it is challenging uh, when every little thing is being nitpicked. And like that's a very fine line and it's very different for different people and for different client sets. Like some clients will ask a ton of questions and it doesn't feel like it's coming from a place of like, what about this? What about this? What about this? It doesn't feel like an accusatory series of questions. It feels like a clarifying series of questions, and that's not stressful. But then sometimes it's just like, well, why is it this? And I'm like, I don't know. That's how fabric works. I don't. I'm so sorry. Like, and that's just I'm gonna chalk that up to just like I'm just younger and I need to figure it out. And like it's fine. It is fine, but it is stressful. But it's fine, but it's stressful. Or like previously getting skaters to feel comfortable in the setting of getting these costumes made. And that's something that I did a lot of like one-on-one research, like more reading and video and interview research as well before I actually like launched of like what made the difference between a costume experience really good or really bad, uh, separate from the actual end product of the costume. Because when people are more comfortable, then they feel more at ease to speak up about what they want or don't want. And then there's that like mutual trust, and that feels good. And so that is a challenge I am trying to address and navigate in life and in this business.
Totally. No, that's great. We were talking about this a little bit before, but costumes are really also one of the places where gender differences are the most pronounced in skating. And so I'm curious, how you approach that, I suppose, first when you're making costumes for yourself, and then how do you think about that when you're making costumes for other people?
Yeah. So uh overall I try to be try to be aware of the language that I use in general. But um, especially in like using they them pronouns. When people are like, oh, using they them pronouns are so hard, like, and I'm like, okay, well, you can practice by not assuming the gender of people around you, no matter how they're presenting, and taking that and applying it to costumes of like, and the people that come in who want costumes of like, okay, just because they look like a boy and dress like a boy and compete with boys, they might feel something different. So like entering it with an openness of like, what kind of costume do you want? What kind of garments are you looking for? Things that can go in either direction of like male versus female, is one way to kind of like open that door of like, what do you want? I'm not gonna say, oh, you were here for a shirt. I'm saying like, what are we getting? Like, what's on the menu? Um, and then also in terms of talking about my costumes in general, people will be like, "Oh, do you do boys' costumes? Do you make dresses? Do this?" And I'm like, "I make whatever you want me to make. I don't care who the skater like who the skater thinks they are, this, that, the other. Like, if they want this article of clothing, I can make that for them easily, and that is fine." Because I know a lot of other designers will be like, "I don't do boys' shirts." It's very strange to me. They're
Yeah.
not difficult to make, especially compared to dresses. But I don't know. I'm not them, and I won't know, and that's fine. Um, and then I also try to think about how like, and this is also part of my own gender exploration and learning about myself and how I like to present and whatnot. Of it took me a really long time for myself to learn that like fabric doesn't have a gender, color does not inherently have a gender, shapes do not have it, it's a shape, it's a visual thing that we look at, and it does not humans prescribe societal norms and gender norms onto images and symbolism and stuff the other, but it doesn't mean that those things specifically are inherently gendered. And so I try to approach costume design in that way as well, of like, okay, well, if you're a masculine guy getting a shirt for figure skating and this, that, the other, if the color pink matches your music more and you're not gonna, and the skater feels okay with it, we should make your shirt the color pink because it matches the music better, or it matches the theme, or it matches your movements, or adding certain types of lace or a visual like texture or something, if that's what matches the packaging and the themes and the movement and the story that the skater is telling and performing, then like, why wouldn't we do that? You know? Like stones on a costume are not gonna inherently make you gay. Like it's a reflective piece of glass that catches light. That has nothing to do with that. There are, and you know, that's coming from me who like doesn't want to wear dresses because I don't want to be seen a certain way. Like, and if another skater feels that type of way about a certain color or stones or fabrics or whatever, then like obviously I respect that. But you know,
Yeah.
if they're okay with it, I invite them to, as long as it does not affect their skating. I and their mental health, etc. I invite them to maybe explore, like, hey, let's try adding crystals to this costume. Let's try using more pinks and reds than like blue or gray or whatever, to see how it looks overall. And if we like it, amazing. If we don't, all right, cool. We tried it. We made an attempt, and that's fine. Um, I am reading through my bullet point. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's
I
kind of
always noticed when there are boys that wear or basically whenever there are people skating in the men's category that wear anything other than black pants, I immediately like they go up like a point in my own personal like scoring of how much I enjoy them, like regardless of anything else, because it just stands out so much. And I always think, right, you're thinking about what you want to wear as a full costume from your head to your toes, and not just, you know, what color shirt did I need to put on to for this program. And it it's not that everybody has to be wearing like colorful pants for every costume, but whenever somebody does put some sparkles on it or
yeah,
do something, it stands out. I remember thinking about that with Evan Bates's costumes in the season, well, in general, but
yeah,
especially in the season that it had the sort of David Bowie Latin rhythm dance, that he had some sparkles down the legs of his pants. And I was thinking, oh, that's really great, because it's not like it's a, you know, over the top intensely decorated costume, but just having that little thing was so cool. So I always notice when there are those sort of deviations from the sort of standard script of what the costume looks like, and it's fun to see.
I will also say part of that, not for everyone, but a big part of that is buying a shirt is a lot less expensive than buying a shirt and pants, and especially pants that can only be worn with that shirt, where they don't match anything else. So like, I agree. I love to see when I'm like, oh my God, you're wearing something different. Amazing. But I also get that like, oh, that adds so much more money to the
Yeah,
whole package. So
good point. Yeah.
yeah.
Um,
Um,
no, as someone whose every costume that I've had for the last 4 years has been a variation of black jeans and a black t-shirt with a different colored shirt over the top of it, I fully understand that that desire to not, you know, spend that
yeah.
much money on every single costume.
Fortunately, I make my own costumes, so I get to do whatever I want.
No, that's
Great.
great. Yeah. I just wanted to ask you, if there are costumes, that are sort of for you are like iconic figure skating costumes that you admire or that, you think of as being particularly like great examples that are inspirations.
Um, so deeply, unfortunately, I'm like not super well versed in like the history of costumers in figure skating because I really did just roll up on the Yuri on Ice vibes and I was like, great, amazing. And it was not until much more recently that I had half of the Team USA boys completely roasting me for not knowing who people were. And I was like, oh, I really need to pay attention to what is going on. Like costumes, skaters,
Yeah.
countries being represented, like, whoa. Um, all that being said, recently I purchased two art books from Satomi Ito, who did Hanyu's costumes. And also having worked for Yumi, Yumi's like, here are all the Japanese designers. And I'm like, okay, these are our competitors. Okay, okay. Oh, okay, it's happening. Okay, great. Cool, 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 cool. I recently purchased two of her art books and I also here we go. Um I there's like a delicateness in how she decorates her costumes. And like it doesn't matter if it's a costume that's being worn by a man or a woman or someone who potentially does not
Mhm.
either or both. Um, she uses the same or similar decoration techniques for every type of garment that she produces. Um, which I'm like, yes, that's a vibe that I can get with. Um, and just like the quality of her construction, like getting those like close up photos, I'm like, yummy. I love to look at this. So my most recent costume that I made for myself um, for the 23-24 season, I have a lot of those pages bookmarked to be like, I like this, I like this, I like this. This is it, like these are techniques that I know how to do, but I haven't done them on a skating costume specifically yet, like by myself. So let me experiment on my own costume. But if anything goes wrong, it doesn't matter because I'm a hashtag adult skater, like here for the vibes. I'm competitive, but I am here for the vibes.
Yeah.
As opposed to trying it and then making a mistake for so
Yeah.
yeah.
That's great. Yeah. No, those are, I was thinking about some of Zero Hanyu's costumes that are, they work well for, like you see it from a distance and it works as this whole thing. And then you get up close and you're like, oh, there's so much going on in the
So
details
much
as
more. It's
well.
juicy visual texture. I love to see it. Yeah.
It's very fun. Yeah. You know, when I was thinking about sort of the way that costuming has come up in some of the other conversations in skating recently, when we were just watching the ISU Congress and looking at all of the various rule changes that were coming in, one of the things that was new this year in the discussion was the idea that skaters could have a like mark label or something from a designer on their costume and that wasn't previously allowed. I definitely, when I heard that, I was like, the only thing that immediately went to mind for me was that Carolina Costner used to have these dresses that had a big S in the back of them that was because she was sponsored by Suzuki that were not immediate. Like if you didn't know that, you wouldn't necessarily know that that's what it was. But once you knew it, it was like the fabric was in these like swoops. And in my mind,
So
that was a
funny.
competitive costume. It was not. That was like a gala costume. I had to go back and look at it, but that was immediately popped into my mind. So I was like, oh, that's what they're talking about. That's not what they're talking
No.
about. They're talking about like a little label
Well, yeah,
someplace.
like rhythmic gymnastics, they do that,
Yeah.
right? They like
Yeah.
have a little zhuzh. Yeah.
Yeah. And it seemed like the idea they were talking about oh, well, maybe this will be, encouraging more fashion designers to want to make figure skating costumes, or maybe this will make costumes cheaper for skaters if they have like the designers can promote it on TV or something
Mhm.
like that. And so I'm curious sort of what, as somebody who's starting like your own small business specializing in the costumes, like how do you think about that kind of marketing opportunity that they're thinking about? And do you think that designers will actually take up the opportunity to build in a label someplace?
I think, I mean, I think it depends on the designer. Like, obviously, it'll depend person to person. And it depends on also like the type of designer running that company, if that makes sense. Where, like, when I think of bigger names like Matthew, the like feeling by Matthew, last name, or like Brad Griffiths or Lisa McKinnon and whatnot. Or the Astray, the French company that I know Benoit works closely with. Um, my impression, and this is literally just like me being a guy on social media. This is not like here's my professional whatever. It's like me being a guy on social media. Not that deep. I could see potentially like not they're not necessarily like bigger, but like more well known of like here's the thing. But also when you see like a Brad Griffiths dress, like you can tell it's a Brad Griffiths. You don't need a label. You know what it looks like. When you see a Lisa McKinnon, you know it's a Lisa McKinnon. You're like, oh yeah, like that's a Lisa dress. That's a Brad dress. Like that's an Astray dress. That's a Mathieu dress. Like so on the one hand, I'm like, I could see them doing it. On the other hand, they're already so set in their company's style that
Mhm.
they're fairly easy to like if you know the company then you know it anyway in terms of like gaining more advertisement and more clients and this that the other I don't know like for me personally I don't know if I would want to work with people that are not skaters because I make skating costumes and you'll likely hear from me either word of mouth um, from skating at rinks, from something I wore if you're an adult skater, or Instagram. And that's kind of for now, because I'm a single person, I'm okay with staying there. I'm not looking to make ready to wear clothing. I'm not looking to do fast fashion releases of practice clothes or anything like that because I'm not interested in it. Um,
Yeah.
and figure skating is such a niche sport to begin with. Like theoretically, I can see the benefits, and I can see it leaning more towards like how rhythmic gymnastics works. But for me personally, I probably wouldn't, even though I'm not like a well-known company. I if I take on any more work, like I am not ready to hire a
Yeah.
person to help me, and I refuse to do unpaid internships and believe that people need to be paid fairly for the labor that they contribute. I hate living in a capitalist society, but here I am. I'm gonna do what I can. It's not a lot, but um,
Yeah.
I also think that like when I try to think of the costume design as a whole, and like my art background is like painting and fine art illustration. Like the way that you sign your piece or whatever you're painting, etc., your drawing is a part of the entire composition. I'm not personally inclined to tack on a label on the outer side of the garment just to be like, my, if it doesn't match with, excuse me, the composition of the garment as a whole, and if it's distracting, then like the focus is not on me. The focus is on the skater performing and competing and doing their elements. Like my goal, yes, is to make something gorgeous that fits the package, that they feel good in, that they look good in, that everyone's like, oh my God, wow, amazing, love that. Ideally, yeah, can't win them all. My goal is not using a person's body as an advertisement billboard for my business. And if other people want to do it, that has nothing to do with me. Like, it's fine. I don't care. Is kind of how I think about that. But then I was also thinking about, like, when you have like high-end designers, they have like not just a logo, but like a specific construction technique, whether it's like a zipper or a button or something that's like that. They do the same on every garment, where it's like every garment that I make has a bright red zipper, or like Louboutins, which have the red sole, where like it doesn't matter what the shoe looks like, like
Mhm.
I can see that being a thing, but that I feel like is more similar to, like, you can tell it's a Lisa dress, even if her name is
Right.
not written on it. You can tell it's a Brad dress because they have stylistic and design choices they do consistently throughout their entire body of work, and that's part of being an established designer. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, and I think I personally find the sort of high fashion that's based on, putting your Chanel logo on everything a much less interesting kind of fashion. So if that's the kind of image that I have in mind, it seems yeah, not being so much in keeping with the way skating costumes are.
I mean, there's certain designers where they use their logo and branding as part of the design elements of the garments that I'm like, oh, I love this. Actually, this is um, oh my god, this is so embarrassing because I'm gonna say it wrong. So I have to, right? Yeah, Moschino. I like, they do crazy, like, yes, they have their logo and their name and whatever, but they alter it to match whatever the vibe of the garment is, and they're using it as part of the composition of the garment, so that I'm like, oh, like, yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah.
When it's not incorporated, that it leaves space for maybe reflecting that the designer hasn't necessarily thought about the entire composition of the garment, or they are deliberately electing to ignore it, and that is a choice that they can make.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Well, thank you for your thoughts on that, because it's definitely something that I felt like I was struggling to wrap my mind around, hearing different people talk about it as the rules were coming through. It'll be interesting to see what actually comes out of it. Um, and then the other question that I had for you, sort of on this bigger picture, is we've been having a lot of discussions in different spaces, I feel like recently, about cultural appreciation, cultural appropriation, and sort of how does that fit into skating when it comes to music and costume choices. And we have, history, and this is like comes out of ballet and theater also, of like Orientalism, and like, so there's like a whole like big picture. This is not a simple thing. And yet it's been interesting to have conversations within skating, because some people are very aware of those dynamics and other people are like completely like, I want to wear what I'm going to wear. And if it's going to be a geisha dress that I think looks fun, then that's fine. And so anyway, I'm sure that you're being the thoughtful person that you are, these things have, have definitely occurred to you. And I'm kind of curious about how you think about both sort of like referencing things that have specific origins in particular cultural traditions, especially if that's connected to the music that a skater is using, or if there are things where you're like, no, I would never go in that direction. Just, yeah, do you reflect on sort of the cultural appropriation topic?
So also, like, I'm white and I am in a, like, financially privileged position, and now currently like a socially privileged, uh like, where I'm at in my life currently. So, like, take that in mind. Like, ask marginalized ethnic and racial groups what they think about this. Like, get their opinions on this. Ask costumers from not the US what they think about this and whatnot, because their voices, first and foremost, need to be heard and listened to with regards to cultural appropriation. The way that I try to handle it if I receive requests and whatnot is like, this is also coming from like, I lived in Japan for a year. I've studied Japanese I like started teaching myself Japanese in like elementary, middle school, something like that. I own a lot of kimono. I know how to make kimono. My thesis in college was like the westernization of contemporary Japanese clothing within the first, 2 decades of Meiji and the country opening. Um, um, and whatnot. And like I a lot of people will be like, oh, like wearing kimono is cultural appropriation. And I'm like, I have decades of like appreciation and learning the language and the culture and this, that, the other, that like I would like to think that I know how to appropriately wear kimono. And like we could go on a whole other tangent about that. But just in terms of like context of my ideas of appropriation of costumes of cultures in costumes in skating. I think it's hard when the skater, the team, the choreographer might all have done the research and made sure they've hit all the checked all the boxes of like, we are appreciating whatever culture this costume is being inspired from and whatnot. And they've worked closely with people in that community to do this design and this, that, the other. But you're going to get out on a stage, whether it is a small local stage or a huge international stage, and people are not going to know that you've done that work. People are not going to know that you understand the context necessarily. And like, it's difficult in that way. Like, even if you do all the right things, I think there's still a lot of like potential for like, why is this person wearing this?
We don't have statements in skating. There's no place to necessarily show your process, whether if you had a really deep, thoughtful, inclusive process or not. Like,
and then it's also, you have to look at like, there are marginalized and underrepresented ethnic and racial groups, are they able to wear something of their own culture without backlash in a sport that is heavily founded in white privilege, white supremacy, etc.? Like, are they able to wear their costumes from their cultures without being reprimanded? Yes, no. How does that weigh if someone not of that culture, or who is white or white passing, etc., or lighter skinned, etc., like how like that gets real messy? Not real messy, but it's something that's important that I don't feel like there's enough racial and ethnic equality of skaters and teams and coaches and people in like the higher levels of ISU and US figure skating and stuff for it it doesn't, I don't know. To me, it does not seem fair. It does not, even if they like show the appreciation and they've done everything well, like it doesn't come off like a very smart decision to me when a young blonde hair, blue eyed white girl is skating to a Bollywood program and has traditional Indian costuming influence and inspiration in their costume, even if the costume is well constructed and well done and is age appropriate and stuff like that. Like, okay, this little girl is wearing it. What about a girl who actually represents Indian culture and like maybe, like I don't feel like it's okay until it's okay for everyone and everyone gets the same access to do that in skating. That makes sense. And I'm
It does.
yappa, so I don't know if the words that I'm saying are making sense in order. Um,
No, they are, and I think that you're bringing together like a couple of the threads that I think are important in
like
it.
it is intersectional. Like the the struggles that queer people face in skating are different but related to the struggles that Black and Brown and Indigenous people are facing in figure skating, which are different but related to, like the issues that of like men versus women and like it of like sexism within the sport and which then leads into abuse and like it is all related. It's not the same, but it is related. And you can't solve one like social issue without addressing all of them. And then you can expand that further into like it's not just an issue, it's an issue with the United States. It's an issue with like our socio-political, economic climate. And then you like get too far and you're like, everything is overwhelming, very scary. Suddenly like get very small and back into like, what am I doing?
Right.
What am I doing about this? And just as a side note, when is this being aired? Do you know?
It probably won't be for at least a month just because I'm behind on getting things out. So
That's totally fine. I'm just being a silly goose, and I'm like, I don't want to tell anyone what my free skate is until I skated it.
Yeah, this is
It's a
definitely
month
not
that I can
coming
work
out.
with that. That's fine because I'm doing it at camp in July. But as an example, my free skate for the upcoming season is Samson and Delilah. Um, Again, because after talking with my coach, I am pandering to the judges with classical skating. They already know it. They already know what's going on. It's a type of physical movement and music and story that they already know. So I'm like, focus on me skating. I want to win. I want to win. Give me the points. That being said, it's Samson and Delilah, which comes from theater, which comes from ballet, which comes from Orientalism in the 1800s, late 1800s. Don't quote me on that. I have ADHD. Please don't quote me on numbers and dates and names.
But it's from that whole period where there were so many of these like classical works are coming out of,
an interest of Western power in the, in Far East Asia, in Middle East, anything that was other was then commodified and turned into entertainment for white people in power. So in designing my own costume and my choreography and everything like that for this war horse piece where I'm trying to be like, okay, traditionally this is what happens, but also traditionally this pulls on Orientalism and racist stereotypes and racist movements and appropriation of clothing styles. And what do I do with that for myself for something that I am wearing? While also trying to balance like a lot of the dresses made for this piece of music for figure skating are like gorgeous, stunning, bejeweled. We got like jewel tones. We have jewels on the costume. We got stones for days, like the flowy mesh chiffon bits. Like love to see it. And the men are not looking as great. Costume not a serve. They're not eating. Like so then I'm trying to find the gender balance between these two ways that these costumes have been done before. And also be like, don't make it a racist stereotype. Don't like recognize, inform myself, do the learning of like where do these design ideas come from? And how do I make sure that the ones that I pick don't reflect on anything that I don't feel like reflects me as and my opinion. How I'm trying to navigate being on this earth.
Yeah.
In a way that is fair to
it's
other
complex.
people.
There's so But there are so many dimensions to it. And, as you were talking, I was thinking about, I was able to attend a workshop that Skate Canada did with Phil Chan, who's written a lot about yellowface and Orientalism in theater and ballet. And the part of that about drawing on sort of the othering and the exotic of Asian cultures in that case, then for the entertainment, but also kind of fueling creativity of people in sort of this Western traditional art forms. It reminds me a lot of the way I'm making a leap here, but there's this comparison that I kept popping into my head was thinking about the sort of trendy moment that voguing has been having in skating and how suddenly you have so many presumably straight white people throwing some voguing arms into things. And it's like, there's like a big difference, like there's so many gradations of like whether that is like okay or not, or, and that's too binary, but it was making me think about the ways that, um, you know, there's that like sort of acquisitiveness of like, oh, that's interesting. I want that because that is
Do you
different.
understand it? And like, I will be the first to say, like, I do hear myself speaking, and I know that I'm using words that were originally from Ave that are then appropriated by white gay men that then enter, public lexicons and then become internet memes. And I deeply, unfortunately, am chronically online, and I do the like echolalia thing where I hear a thing and I'm like, oh, this is in my head now. I'm gonna say it forever. Not an excuse, but here I am. Like,
Yeah.
just like
Culture's complicated. There aren't these like clear bright lines to draw in it either. So I think it's really interesting. I'm super excited to see what you come up with for your Samson and Delilah, though. That sounds like it's going to be a really interesting challenge.
We're kind of trying to focus more on the like, yes, the story of Samson and Delilah, like the biblical story, but also Samson and Delilah, gender, like chose it because I'm trying to be like, here's your war horse, judges. I hope I'm doing it enough justice that you give me the points for it. And then like, don't I'm allowed to curse. I don't think I'm allowed to say slurs on the thing, but afterwards I can tell you like what our angle is for this program. Instead of being like, we're doing a recreation of the theater of Samson and Delilah, which is heavily steeped in Orientalism. We're going for more of the
Fun.
what we're hoping for.
No, it sounds like it's gonna be really fun. And yes, well, hopefully that will be that right combination for the judges of like, oh, this is a thing I know, but also, oh, this is so interesting. So I feel like I'm being brave and whatever by going for it. So that hit that right button.
I'm hoping, but all I can do is hope. All I can do is hope.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much, Niko. I really enjoyed talking with you, and this has been super fun and also quite educational for me. So I appreciate it. Thanks again to Niko Cohen for a great conversation. You can follow them on Instagram at Niko_Nikiforov and their business at Lavender Thread Co. You can reach me with comments or suggestions for topics and people I should talk to by email at fsfuturepodcast@gmail.com or on Instagram and Twitter at FutureFSPodcast. If you appreciate the podcast, you can also support my work with a tip jar at futurefigureskating.pinecast.co. Thanks also to Ivan Danilyuk for video editing. You remember to subscribe and review The Future of Figure Skating on whatever platform you use and share it with your friends.